Hi, Adina Sullivan here on the Q Live stage here at Q16, and I have the privilege of getting to interview someone who I admire very much. We have Dr. Joyce Valenza, who's a teacher librarian and currently an assistant professor at Rutgers University.
Right.
Yeah, so welcome so much. Thank you so much for being here at Q. It's lovely to have you out on our coast for a change. I usually see you out in other places.
Right. It's great to be here. The climate is way better than Philadelphia right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
March in Palm Springs is not a bad place. Right?
No. Happy to be here.
So, Joyce, one of the things, and you and I have talked about this, is there's the way libraries used to be. When I was a kid, you went to the library and you used the card catalog, and the librarian would read stories and help you find some books. And that's not what libraries look like now.
No, not at all.
What do libraries look like now? What are you seeing?
Well, there's a whole bunch of ways to look at this. Librarians are literacy specialists in so many ways, and literacy has exploded in its meaning. And so when we're talking about literacy, we're not just talking about print literacy. We're talking about media literacy, data literacy, tool literacy, global literacy. There's so many different flavors, and there's so many different containers for the story. And so what we're looking at is being far more places where people come to create, far more places where we are no longer a place where the experience is transactional like in a grocery store, but more transformational like what you see happening in a kitchen. We are not just giving somebody a book and checking it out, and that's the end of it. But I think what I really have understood from my Q experience, it's been delightful, and I love being here. But I've seen how few librarians are here in the state of California.
This is a sad truth, sad truth.
And so when I'm talking to teachers here as well as librarians, of course, because there aren't that many. But I was speaking to a bunch of English teachers at the high school level, and we were talking about resources and some of the things that we were curating, and I said to them, well, don't you have access to things like JSTOR or the Gale products or literary criticism resources? And they had only the stuff that they had copied from anthologies and placed in PDFs on their Google Classroom sites. And there is the inequity of that is just huge. So when these students who've come through California schools without a K-12 library program get to the university, they will not know what academic research looks like. And that scares me. And so there's not an information literacy program through an expert like a librarian going on around here in many of our schools. And I just wonder how you change a culture like that.
And I think it's so different from place to place, even within California's a huge place, and so different from place to place. So for teachers that are wanting to figure out how do I deal now with whether it's a librarian or if I have a library media tech at my site, what should I be looking for? What can I ask for from this person? What kinds of things are available to me? Or should I use this person as a resource for? How do I do that now?
Well, you can, if you look at what a librarian has traditionally done and think about it in a translated way, the translations seem logical to me. So when we thought about collection in the past, we thought about books on shelves. We're looking right now on somebody curating a virtual collection for an entire school. And we're talking not only about content, but tools. So what are the tools a second grader would need to create a fabulous digital story? And what are the tools that they would need in terms of finding information, note-taking, organizing, synthesizing, publishing, and then promoting. And that kind of toolkit is a new kind of collection. But similarly, the sorts of things I think about in a library with a physical collection are really exploded as well. So I imagine that every student should come into a physical library expecting to be able to borrow a green screen or a tripod or a camera or pretty much anything that they would need in the process of putting a communication product together. And so that's collection.
And so, yeah, that's really the role of that person in the library is really expanded.
It's expanded and it's scaled. So in the past, we might buy one copy of a reference book, and it would be on a shelf, and it'd be used by one individual student. Now that can be embedded on the Google site or the Edmodo platform of the 9th grade science teacher, and it would get used by as many students who wanted to use it at one time. So the instructional voice of the librarian is an information and meta literacy person is scaled, but also the resources are scaled, and you see a greater return on investment when somebody's actually scaling those resources. And those resources, they're so much bigger than the textbook, as you know. Yes. How are we making new texts, and how are we tasking students with creating media-rich texts of their own? And how are we celebrating student work, which also ought to be curated and part of a collection?
And you make such an important point about the return on investment, that having someone there that can support staff and students in finding and using these tools and resources is huge.
Adina, and teaching as well, because the stuff that we're looking at here, you know, I watch people who are in the audiences going, oh my God, there's somebody on stage who's doing everything, but I can't do that. I'm worried about classroom management, and I'm worried about addressing content standards, and I'm worried about this. If a librarian were present, that person would be your partner, not only in gathering resources, but in implementing instruction, in planning instruction, implementing instruction, and assessing instruction. And we'd also do the work that is not part of the K-12 main content area curriculum, like who works on things like understanding